Good afternoon. The Committee of the Whole is back in order. When we left off, we were at the Department of Revenue and Taxation on page 56. Again, I remind the colleagues this was amended in the package. Senator Uggan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I can beg the indulgence of the chair and also our colleagues, we did bookmark a provision or a section with the Guam Office of Veterans Affairs. I do have the amendment, the proposed amendment, so if we can revert back, if I can request your consideration to revert back there and entertain this amendment.
The amendment being proffered by Senator Uggan is on page 50 on Veterans Affairs. Page 50, 50. Oh, I'm sorry, it hasn't been distributed. Okay, we bookmarked this for Senator Uggan. So on this amendment, you recognize, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If you take a look at the allocations for the Office of Veterans Affairs, Mr. Speaker, previously it was given $600-some thousand for this fiscal year, and the proposal that we have before us is to provide an appropriation of $409,930. So the amendment I have before you, colleagues, is what we discussed, or I discussed a little earlier, to request consideration, is to allow the governor's office to be able to use his transfer authority to transfer money into the Office of Veterans Affairs. So it would read, sub-item number 2, Imagalan Guam is hereby authorized to transfer funds from the fiscal year 2019 appropriations set forth in the Office of Imagalan Guam as provided in subsection A, section 1, chapter 5 of this act to the Guam Office of Veterans Affairs in an amount not to exceed $300,000 for operational requirements. I believe, Mr. Speaker, I did say a little earlier that the Office of Veterans Affairs is in need of additional resources. And this, I believe, would be able to be sufficient to assist them and in their operations for the next fiscal year. So I ask for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and our colleagues.
On the Uggan amendment, Senator Snogstein, did I see you wish to be recognized?
Mr. Speaker, I just rise in support of the amendment. I would just hope that the incoming governor would identify a true organizational chart so that the veterans are serviced properly. That's all I hope for in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other senator wish to be heard on the Uggan amendment? Is there an objection to the Uggan amendment? No objection? Thank you,
Mr.
Senator
Speaker.
Uggan.
Thank you, colleagues.
We're back to page 56. Revenue and taxation. Again, I remind the colleagues, this was amended in the packet yesterday. Anything on page 56? Sub 1? Any senator? Sub 2, banking and insurance enforcement.
Mi-
Senator Snogestein.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the intent of the SAR when we adjusted the budget. I only ask that who has first priority at funds that are collected? Does revenue tax have first dibs at it? Does DOE have first dibs, or the government? That's the only thing I'm concerned about. Because as funds are collected under the SAR, if revenue tax doesn't get the first shot at that money, based on the budget, and funds, not adequate funds are collected, we're going to have reduction in force at revenue tax. And that's where all the money is coming from for everybody, for every agency in the government of Guam, all branches of government. So I'm just concerned about that, if they're going to get first dibs.
We all share that concern, and we've been reminded several times I have the cash management authority.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? Sub B. The executive has reminded us on many occasions that they have cash management authority. I wish I did, but no, it's the executive that has claimed that. Okay? Page 57, anything on Banking and Insurance Enforcement Fund? Thank you. Page 58, Bureau of Statistics and Plans. Sub 1 in I. Any senator wish to be heard? Sub B, Business and Economic Statistics Program. Any senator? Any objection to this? Here, thank you. Department of Public Works. Page 59. Sub A. Sub 1. Sub 2, Village Streets Resurfacing and Repairs. 2.9. The bottom, page 59.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, is this amount reflect the additional revenue from the fuel tax increase?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Egan?
Granted, I opposed it, Mr. Speaker, but it's already law, and my legislation to repeal it did not pass. But, Mr. Speaker, I recall that when that legislation was being discussed, that the projected revenues was going to be in the neighborhood of $3.5 million. And I noticed that the allocation here is 2.9. Is there a reason for that? Because that was the whole argument behind raising the liquid fuel tax.
I believe, or B, that was as much as we could find and project for a 12-month period.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So on this village streets, anything? Thank you. K, Guam Contractors License Board.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry, it's just a thought that came to mind with regards to the Village Streets funds. If I can ask your consideration to restrict it for that purposes outlined there, and that shall not be subject to the governor's transfer authority. I know there are general provisions within the entire budget that is very similar in language, but if in fact the argument was repeatedly stated that that's to repair roads, then we need a mechanism in here to ensure that that amount is actually set aside to repair roads rather than utilized for other purposes.
All right, well, we'll just add another line with your, with everyone's concurrence. The sums appropriated in this section shall not be subject to Imagalahin Guam's transfer authority. Would that be sufficient?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, so clerk and legal, please note that restriction. Vice Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to find my copy of the 2018 to compare this language. I think that the current director has prioritized not just village streets, but they've narrowed it down to the priority list of village streets. So they all come from the master plan, and then they've been narrowed down to like the top 3 projects from each mayor. So I was wondering if that language was included last year, we could also include that again here. And if not, if I could just get that, the name of that list and submit it.
It's reading the same as the last year's
All right.
language. And for everyone's information, the governor's request was 1.8 for this one. With what we've seen collected, it went to 2.9. But the governor's original request was 1.8.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, are we still on page 59 in reference to the resurfacing?
We're there if you wish, yes.
And you mentioned that it's 2.9 million?
Yes.
Wasn't that the estimate for this year? And because of the continued increase on next year, wouldn't there be more money? Or no?
No, for this current year, well, in the governor's request, it was 1.8. We upped it to 2.9 with the collections we figured there would be from the increase in the highway fund, in the collections.
Point of information. This is a point of information, Mr. Speaker. In this fiscal year's budget, fiscal year 2018, you're absolutely right. You identified the carryover balance from fiscal year 17, which was $1.8 million dedicated towards the repair of roads. So in reality, there was not any appropriation from fiscal year 18 for repair of roads, but it was a carryover funding mechanism that was provided in the prior year's budget to allow for the governor to identify the additional two, so it added up to $3.8 million. And it came from the Guam Highway Fund.
Okay. No, we did appropriate. Okay? And it's more than what they requested.
Mr.
Because
Speaker, you're
yes.
saying that the increase in liquid fuels tax was appropriated for 2018 because
No.
all the directors have told us no.
For 2019,
For 2019, yes.
Yes.
That's what we're doing
we
here.
are.
All right,
The
thank you.
increase collection is going to that amount.
All right.
Okay? Public Works, anything else? Vice Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if to do it here or I was thinking to do it later, but now I'm thinking maybe it should be done here, is I would like to appropriate the sum of $3.5 million from fiscal year 2018. It was supposed to be collected in 2018, and so just to make sure that it will be used in addition to this amount in 2019.
Okay, let's do that in miscellaneous provisions.
All right, thank you.
Please prepare that. Okay. Public Works. Public Works. Guam Contractors License Board. Anything on page 61? Guam Board of Registration for Professional Engineers, Architects, and Land Surveyors, PEALS Board. Any senator wish to be heard? PEALS. M, Guam Police Department. Senator Nelson, Madam Chair, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm also working on an amendment for the miscellaneous provisions to provide funding through the tax amnesty being collected. If there's any collected, that portion of it will go to the reserves, the police reservists.
Okay. Please make sure that that's ready when we get this
Thank
section.
you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. But on page 63, as is set before you, Guam Police Department as set forth in M. Senator Uggan.
Mr. Speaker, you know, one of the concerns that our community continue to inquire about is additional law enforcement officers. So do we have numbers as to how many officers on the force have retired or are retiring in fiscal year 18? And then any additional recruits? We know that the COPS program, it's a federally funded program, is financing some of the police recruits. But I'm not familiar with the cycle. So are you aware of how many individuals, officers will be retiring, and then what that would transpose into in terms of supporting any additional recruits?
I did not ask that question, but maybe the oversight chair might be able to enlighten us. I did not ask that question of the number retiring.
I'll request that information, Mr. Speaker. I
Thank
don't have it on me.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the appropriation for the Guam Police Department, for a total of 34,128,701. Police Patrol Vehicle and Equipment Revolving Fund. Any senator wish to be heard? Senator Augustine, do you wish? No? Three, cost sharing initiative related to the criminal justice information system. Thank you. N, Department of Corrections. For the information of the colleagues, when the Department of Corrections came in, they did not provide for their food services, and we had to put that back in.
Could you repeat that, sir? They didn't provide for, what's that, sir?
Because they had set in their, they had a cap, for some reason, the executive budget request that was provided to us in January 31st, did not include food services for the inmates. And when they came before us, they said, oh, yeah, we know that we didn't. And I said, well, what do you expect? And so we put it back in.
Do you also have here indicating the medical costs, the services that are provided by GMH, or is that in GMH budget?
We provided we can use some of it. The entire amount, we did not, and I'll be real frank.
Okay.
We're hoping that part of that would be covered by compact impact discretionary spending by the administration, which has been used in the past.
Thank you.
We felt that the amounts that were spent for the food contract took a big chunk. I mean, behavioral wealth costs us 4.5, almost 5, and this one costs us, I think, almost 3. Addition. Okay? Two, cost of care and custody for prisoners in federal facilities. That's a cost that is a fixed cost. And the cost sharing initiative also. Okay? Department of Corrections. Department of Agriculture, page 68.
Mr. Speaker, I just have one question on the Department of Correction.
Go ahead.
Is there any reimbursement to the government of Guam when Department of Correction is required to hold federal detainees on Guam? Is there any reimbursement or any costs shared with them? I mean, because I see you have costs of care and custody for prisoners confined in federal facilities, but when they're confined on Guam, like at a Ganya precinct or in Manila, is there any shared costs? I mean, are they paying Department of Correction for the custody of their folks?
It is received, yes. And that's the inmate revolving fund. Right under general fund on line 15.
That's under the inmate revolving fund?
On page 68 on line 15,
66, right?
I mean 66.
1.4?
Yeah, almost 5.
Okay.
Okay, is that clear? Anything else on Department of Corrections? We can go. Department of Agriculture, page 68. Any senator wish to be heard on this one? Vice Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, is this the amount for the conservation officers in subsection 4? Is that, are these supplies, is this an addition? I know that they were very concerned about the equipment that they had was very old and insufficient. Does this give them more? Does that suit what they had been asking for?
That was as requested.
Just a point of information, Mr. Speaker. Because we have been writing this provision in such manner for FY18, the conservation officers finally do have the support that they need to acquire vehicles, and we saw that with this term, that in a long time they finally were able to purchase a vehicle and receive some equipment because of the specific line item appropriation that we have been doing since FY18. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much for providing that information. Any other question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm curious about subsection 2 for the animal shelter. Instead of being allocated, it's an appropriation from the general fund to
Yes,
AGR.
it's an additional amount. It's not taken from their top.
All the rest, even, I mean, are not separate appropriations, just so they're all allocations. So this is just.
Yes, the allocations are the ones that are within Department of Agriculture. This one's a pass-through.
Mr. Speaker, I'm just comparing that number to this, like the plant inspection and permit fund and the rabies prevention fund, and those funds are so small compared, and so I see you're appropriating all of these. These are balances left in these funds.
In subsection 3, that is the collection from that rabies prevention fund.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much is collected.
Right, that's what's collected. Is that adequate? What versus, yeah, because, yeah, comparing that to 43,000 for rabies prevention, only 99,000 for plant inspection and permitting.
Those are just revenue projections again from those funds.
Yes, but are they sufficient, I guess, Mr. Speaker, to meet their needs versus what we're giving to the animal shelter? Because this is general fund money. It's not even at the discretion of the department. Mm-hmm. I guess, can we put it into the department and let him, you know, just in case he can manage, or the department director can manage?
If they want. This is one of those pass-throughs. This is not within the department. I think it's a nonprofit, separate.
Well, currently, they're contracting, I think, with a nonprofit for the well, this one, see, is written for the operations of a singular nonprofit. It really should be for the purpose that Department of Ag is supposed to be fulfilling, and that they then contract it out if they want, right? Just like we used to, we changed all our appropriations to behavioral health. Instead of saying they're going to go directly to sanctuary, that it would go to behavioral health, and then they would decide to contract out or not. I'm just concerned about the proportion of what we're giving there. Is that what the director feels he doesn't need this money for plant inspection? Because it's less than plant inspection. Rabies prevention. That's all. I just want to make sure
Okay.
he's able to fulfill his mandate, and that all of these things work together that way.
Thank you. I apologize. I wasn't as focused on the Department of Agriculture when they came in for their hearing, so I didn't ask all those questions. So I cannot answer those questions at this point. Okay. For Department of Agriculture. Guam Public Library System. On this for the Guam Public Libraries. Any senator wish to be heard on this? Senator Argan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question with the Guam Public Library system. Is there a director for the library?
The chair, the oversight chair can correct me, but if memory serves me right, when we had the hearing, there hasn't been a director named for a while. It's been part of that conglomerate
Yes. And that's
doing
the reason why.
prioritization.
Uh-huh.
They
That's why, Mr.
consolidated
Speaker,
it under-
I'm asking, because in this particular case, you're right, Guam Public Library was absorbed into the Department of Chamorro Affairs and several other entities. I don't know if it was by executive order.
Yes,
Okay. So there's no director at the moment.
as designated, no.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Guam Public Libraries. Department of Youth Affairs. Senator Lee.
Mr. Speaker. I've circulated an amendment to add to the last page of this section, so section Q3. And basically this amendment would just authorize the DYA director to, it just gives him the legal authority to pay out hazardous pay that was accrued in fiscal year 2016. So it would allow the Department of Youth Affairs to use up to $39,000 in their fiscal year 2018 budget, their fiscal year 2018 money, to be able to pay out this hazardous pay that was accrued several years ago. So they already have the money to do it. We're just giving them the legal authority to do it, and I just felt that this is a good place to kind of put that language.
You can make the move, you can put it in here. It probably is better placed in miscellaneous with everything else. Okay? We'll note that you're going to be making this in miscellaneous for us. Okay? So page 71. Page 71. Thank you. Guam Environmental Protection Agency, page 73. Any senator wish to be heard? Any senator wish to be heard on Guam EPA? This is just the local funds. They have a substantial federal.
Mr. Speaker, does this language treat the recycling revolving fund the same way we did last year, or are we changing it? Are we giving back?
In 5, there is a section with revolving fund.
Yes, that was a big source of contention last year, and I think they had entered into an MOU with the mayors. I just wanted to know, is this the same language as last year, or have we changed this? I thought I had heard that it was being changed.
There was last year an MOU that was negotiated by one of our members, and this year, I'm not sure.
It's not in there, Mr. Speaker.
It's
If in page 74, item 5, it appropriates the revolving recycling fund pursuant to the law.
yeah.
Sorry.
The recycling fund is being appropriated as per the law for recycling purposes.
All right. So this is the same as last year?
No.
No. Last year, because the rules weren't completely promulgated for use of the revolving recycling fund, there was the MOU through the mayors. As I understand it, they're going to be able to move forward with the program, so now the funds would be available for Guam EPA to administer it pursuant to the law.
But can OFB confirm, is that what this section 5 is then?
Yes.
Is this new?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's what I've been asking.
That's for the sole purpose.
That's what I've been asking, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go back to 1. Is there any problem with the EPA at 1, subsection 1? 2, closure, monitoring, and opening of the landfill. Subsection 3, beach monitoring. Subsection 4, pesticide management fund. And 5, recycling revolving fund. And I thank our colleagues for holding my feet to the fire on this one.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to place a bookmark on this. I think there might be a potential amendment moving up if there's no objection from my colleagues.
All right, we'll bookmark it. Senator Nelson, you have a question?
Just to share what the amendment would be, Mr. Chair?
They're working on that, but we'll. Do you have anything in the section that you
No,
wish?
I just a little bit of concern because I understand that the mayors wrote a resolution in support of a specific company or individual, and I'm concerned that this money will be used at their discretion and not used for what it was really intended for, which is to pick up trucks, vehicles on the side of the road, white goods, etc.
Yeah, the way that we wrote the recycling fund is try to comply with the law, that it's for the sole purpose of what the law was passed for. If there is an amendment that takes it away from that, we will address it when and if it's introduced. If after we pass this legislation with this specific understanding, since I see both of them staring at me and making sure that I don't put it in anywhere else. Now all we have to do is to make sure that the administrator and the governor don't do anything with it. We put it here very clearly for the sole purpose, and I don't know how much clearer we want to put it. Okay? So EPA with a bookmark here for Senator Estevez. Department of Labor. All right, we'll just take a short recess. I believe I see 2 amendments being circulated at this point. All right, let's go back out on the record. The Oversight Chair has informed me that she will move it in miscellaneous provisions. Anything else on Department of Labor? Page 75. Subsection 2, an appropriation to the Workmen's Compensation Fund. Workers' Compensation Fund, page 76. Senators? Thank you very much. We're now on T, Department of Parks and Recreation.
Mr. Speaker?
Vice Speaker?
Are we on?
We're on T, Department of Parks
All
and Recreation, page 77.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that the same amount that was allocated last year be also, that a paragraph be added, that it be allocated to the Division of historic preservation. As you know, they have a very unique role. It is put under the Department of Parks and Recreation right now, but their role is very unique in the government, and so I would just like that allocation to be very clear so that they're not at, you know, the behest of any new director, that they were going to be able to continue to function because they play a very crucial enforcement role.
Okay, why don't we just take a very short recess at this point? Because it is the whole paragraph, I want all the other senators to understand what you're proposing, all right? If somebody would print it and circulate it so that everybody can see what it is. We're in a recess. The committee's back in order. Madam Vice Speaker, your amendment's been circulated.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment's been circulated. There's a blank in parentheses. That should be subsection 4. And so it would be adding a new subsection 4, which simply allocates this amount from, and it says here general fund, but if I could change that to TAF, because that's where the fund comes from this year. And then in the next paragraph where it says T5 should be T4, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Okay, and the 18 will be changed to 19. Okay, everybody, the Vice Speaker's amendment has been placed before you. She's asked that instead of general fund on the second line, it should be tourist attraction fund. And on line 3, rather than 2018, it should read for fiscal year 2019. And on line 4, rather than T5, it should be T4. All right? On this amendment, anyone wish to be heard, or does the Vice Speaker wish to speak any further on it? This is an allocation for the Historic Preservation Office, Resource Division. Any objection to this amendment, or anyone wish to be heard? Any objection or anyone wishing to be heard? If not, thank you, Vice Speaker. On the rest of the Department of Public Parks and Recreation, on the Limited Gaming Fund, the maintenance, repair of public restrooms and pool facilities. I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that you're looking at a additional allocation for the upcoming fiscal year of $549,000, but does anyone in the hall have a status on the Northern Region pool, whether it's fully operational? Because we do know that it was under repair, and then we haven't heard ever since. And I need to highlight that the funding that is being allocated here is from the Tourist Attraction Fund, so it's a relatively sourced fund, so to speak, in terms of providing the allocation. But I wanted to get an understanding, because I know that there have been some constituents who have questioned whether, in fact, that particular pool facility or sports facility is fully operational.
I apologize. I have no idea. I didn't ask that question during the hearing.
Well, okay, I'll follow up and I'll inquire.
All right, thank you. All right, and we have a new 4. Anything else in Parks and Recreation? Anything else in Park and Recreation? Page 79, Department of Land Management. On Department of Land Management, Senator Argan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at the allocation of fiscal year 18 and then also fiscal year 19. We do know that, in fact, it was reviewed just a few months back that, in fact, that the record keeping for some of the land records were not up to par, and there's insufficient safekeeping of that information. So was there any assurance on the part, because one of your initial comments during the course of the budget hearing is that we're starting off with a zero-based budgeting, and you need to justify the additional resources or the resources that will be given to you from the government of Guam to continue to operate. And that was an issue that came out and was reported publicly, that in fact there's some significant deficiencies and questionable record keeping on the part of the Department of Land Management, and we need to correct that situation immediately. And my question is, did the representatives from Land Management, the director, share with members of the committee about whether in fact that will be addressed in this upcoming fiscal year, or if in fact it has been addressed this fiscal year?
At the time of the hearing, that news story hadn't broken, and so that was not one of the questions that I asked them. I don't know if anybody else has information. I'm embarrassed to admit I can't remember who has oversight.
Because I think that any resources that are going to be given to that department, Mr. Speaker, certainly has to focus on that critical service that is being provided to our people. So I wanted to bring that up as a concern. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Anything else on land management? Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to confirm the Land Survey Revolving Fund looks like the only source of funding for the operations. And is that consistent with the law for the revolving fund? It's for operations, not for surveys? I'm trying to look it up real quick, but.
Yes.
It's consistent?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
In fact, as I understand it, they're thinking about increasing the fees to be able to do a lot more to address Senator Ogden's concerns and some others, all right? But that currently is the amount, and that's the amount appropriated. Okay? Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Office of the Chief Senator Egan.
Mr. Speaker, is the medical examiner still anticipating or contemplating retiring? Because I know that that process has to be initiated months before he actually retires. And
there has been an announcement in the paper. The Attorney General has been looking for someone to fill that position, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Chief Medical Examiner's Office. Customs and Quarantine. Customs and Quarantine. Any senator? Thank you. Department of Chamorro Affairs. Department of Chamorro Affairs. Any senator? Wish any clarification? Have any comments? Department of Military Affairs. Any senator wish to have a comment or any clarification? Any senator? Guam Council on the Arts and Humanities, CAHA. CAHA. Territorial Band. Double A, Guam Fire Department. Madam Chair, any comment? As amended, this was also one of the ones that was amended in that packet. Anything else you wish to add, Madam Chair?
Mr. Speaker, no, I believe that we included a $2 million increase for general fund revenue to fund the recruits that were unaccounted for and that are now hired under the GFD staffing pattern, so they are receiving pay. This is just to ensure that their employment continues on.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so on this, as amended, the Guam Fire Department. Thank you. Guam Educational Telecommunication Corporation. PBS. Chamorro Land Trust. Chamorro Land Trust. Chamorro Land Trust.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if it's
Please.
I don't know if it's necessary in this case, but if you recall, some of the Chamorro Land Trust funding was utilized specifically to pay for rent for another government of Guam agency. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to ensure that these funds are used for the specific purposes outlined here and not utilized for any other agency outside of the trust. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, Chamorro Land Trust. Thank you. Guam Regional Transit Authority.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, did you want to bookmark that and I'll prep a amendment or
On
ensuring that trust funds are utilized specifically for Chamorro Land Trust and not utilized for any other government agency?
Yeah, if one of you wants to go break it down, as I understand it, all this money is rent.
What transpired, Mr. Speaker, and was that some of the funds were utilized to pay for rent for the Department of Land Management.
Right, there was, and it's, fortunately or unfortunately, they consolidated or reprioritized and did the.
But then there should be a proportional allocation.
I wish I knew, because I'm still having problems with the per square footage that I'm calculating the cost of rent in that building. But that may be just me from the old, I'm still probably thinking of the 80s when it was $2 a square foot. I'm still trying to figure out how it's possible that it's as high as it currently is.
And the only concern, or the primary concern, Mr. Speaker, is obviously utilizing trust funds for other purposes.
Correct.
Other than the trust.
And I think the oversight chair is trying to make sure that everything is being followed. I'm hoping.
But there's no budgetary restriction here, language that would restrict other than the establishment of the trust.
Okay.
That's really where.
If you wish, would that be a technical amendment, or do you wish to make amendment here and I'll just put a bookmark?
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker?
Do you consider that a technical amendment, or do you want me to bookmark it so you can put a specific appropriate?
I'll leave it to the chair to make the call.
All right.
If you would like it to be a technical
we'll put a
amendment.
bookmark that there is to be a provision here specifically noting that land trust money should just go to trust operations. And we'll try to figure out something whether or not
Thank you, Mr.
it's technical. But I'll take bookmark here. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. if you or the oversight chair could just clarify, I thought there was another fund that it was that fund that where the money was being taken, like a survey type fund.
There's a survey and infrastructure fund, and that funding came from the sale of land remnants, bull cart trails, but that got rated.
All right. Is there any balance in that fund that we can or should appropriate in this section right now, so that they don't spend it on something else and it actually gets spent on what the original purpose was?
My understanding, well, I think OFB is in a better position to answer that.
My understanding was that fund was rated because it was waiting for it needed an appropriation for them, land management or Chamorro Land Trust, to spend it. They thought they needed an appropriation.
They knew that, but it was a difference of they were waiting for it to accumulate so they can go out and issue a substantial contract, and then it got rated.
I'd like to move then that we add a provision here to appropriate the balance of that fund for surveying. Is that correct? For the Chamorro Land Trust surveying?
Correct, yeah, for surveying of land trust properties. Go ahead, you can make the amendment.
I'll put a bookmark on the Chamorro Land Trust, one for Senator Uggan's provision to restrict the expenditures, and two for the Vice Speaker's bookmark to specifically appropriate or allocate the survey infrastructure fund. Oversight Chair, yes.
I just want to make one note that it may not be as easy to, to corral it all just for land, because Land Trust uses the surveying services of the Department of Land Management, and so there's that cross utilization. So it's kind of not as neatly cut. So
it's bookmarked, and we'll hopefully you'll work out something. Okay, so that with the two bookmarks there, we're now moving on to the Guam Regional Transit Authority.
Mr. Speaker, the director did not provide any information in regards to federal funds. Did the director provide any information with regards to federal funds? Because Guam Regional Transit Authority does have access to some federal funds, I believe either in the millions.
Just a second, I'll check. There's 1.4 million in federal funds.
Okay,
It's
just
there.
that it's not reflected in the budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Okay. Guam Regional Transit Authority. Guam Election Commission. Mr. Chair. Guam Election Commission, no. The Oversight Chair, no. All right. Anything else? Guam Election Commission. Guam Solid Waste. This is the corrected number. Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority. Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority. Madam Chair? None? Y Comisión de Tumores and Agua en Historia. Y Comisión, page 94. OTEC. Senator Morrison.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Is there a reason why the Department of Administration still a pass-through for OTEC's appropriation? My understanding, I think Public Law 34-36, which made the office a standalone agency. So, if I could just make an amendment, Mr. Chair, just strike the Department of Administration.
You're correct. It should be just a direct appropriation to them.
Okay, so we'll just.
I apologize. Yeah.
So we just
We were
strike.
just using it from last year's. Yes.
So the amendment would be to strike Department of Administration.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
That was a error on the part of the committee. Yes. Okay. It'll be a technical. I'll have legal corrected. OTEC. Thank you. Chapter 6. The legislative branch. There are some amendments to this in the. Any other amendments? Any other amendments? Legislature? Any other amendments? Chapter 7, Legal Services. Office of the Attorney General.
Mr. Chairman, based on the amendments previously passed, can I get the new cumulative total for available appropriations to the Office of the Attorney General? I believe there was an amendment for the hiring of a tax attorney or equivalency.
It's not in this. That's 300. That'll be an additional amount, yes, 300.
So that would bring the cumulative total to the Attorney General to over 19 million in available spending, correct?
15, no, well, it'll be 1539
1539.
with the addition 300.
With the authority to spend the federal grants as well, correct?
Yes, separately.
So the spending limit is over 19 million.
Correct.
Okay, so just to reiterate, 19 million is available for use for the Attorney General.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, can you go down each part here and give us the amount so we can write it in? pending the engrossment.
Where?
We start with line 15 and then the total and then go down the line so we just know what the amounts are. We are on page 97, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, what was that 19 million?
He's adding the 14,739 plus the 300 that was appropriated for the tax attorney, plus the federal matching.
Okay. I also passed out a couple amendments. If there should be two, but I only have one.
I know you wanted a line item reading. The amendment that the Vice Speaker is proposing is striking everything out to give the Attorney General a lump sum.
That's correct, Mr. Speaker. And in addition to that, in the paragraph, we are adding not just their general fund appropriations, but we're also saying they can use their other special funds. It should be in another sheet that's being passed out, so that those all go together and are authorized to be spent.
All right, let's just stop for a second. Take a short recess and get that circulated. And I know Senator Estevez asked a question. Let me see if I can get that. And Senator San Agustin. No, they're asking for these numbers. I apologize, Senator. The amendment stays as is in here. The 300 is a completely separate one in the amendment that was passed by the body yesterday.
Thank you. But it's still now, and is that placed in the miscellaneous appropriation?
No.
The 300,000?
No, it's the 300 for the tax attorney was going on page 98 as a section 5. And so the appropriation numbers on 97 stay as is.
So, I mean, it's a direct appropriation.
Correct.
But could it still be construed as an operational capacity of the Attorney General under the office of the Attorney General, correct?
Correct, but I think they wanted it specific so that it's understood this was being given for the specific purpose of a tax attorney.
Working under the purview of the Attorney General.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask, or OFB, are we entertaining the amendments before us? I apologize. I'll give the mover of the amendment the opportunity to present.
Why don't you present, Madam Vice Speaker?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the first amendment on page 97 would just be to remove the line items from line 19 to 24, so that, as the Speaker said, it would give the Attorney General a lump sum and, of course, allow her the flexibility to make ends meet with this reduced amount. The second amendment doesn't change. It's to section 5. It doesn't change the lump sum amount. It just authorizes the Attorney General to use these other funds. These are like revolving funds, so it just authorizes the Attorney General to use the balances in these funds as necessary also. These are both the same as what we did in 2018, and they found that useful for their purposes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions. I remember in the arguments on whether or not on a motion to reduce the funding, general fund appropriation to the Attorney General, it was brought up on numerous occasions that around $6 million is used for the division for prosecution, and that the remainder of the budget was used for other things such as consumer fraud protection and other initiatives of the Attorney General. I understand that this was placed in 2008. This was done in 2018, but I'd like to ask OFB if we know the balances of these funds and if we have any tracking data, because as I understand it, these funds go towards those operations. So what we would be looking at based on these amendments would be the 19 million authorized for spending plus whatever internal special funds that the Office of the Attorney General has. And I believe that when we were making the vote and arguments were placed, that the 13 million that they have available to spend outside the approximate 6 million for prosecution was to cover those items. And so I would just like to know the balances of these funds and at least what would be the tracking over a period of at least last fiscal year.
Okay, as it relates to the funds in the Vice Speaker's Section 6 amendments, we've been informed that the grand total of funds as of the 31st was $193,614. That's the 4 or 5 funds that is listed here. If you're asking what the balance is for the appropriations for each of the divisions within the Attorney General's office,
I was not asking that. I'm just concerned with or curious about the balances of these funds and what that would add to the operational ability. And that's in order to ascertain my vote for the amendment passed out, whether or not we want to allow maximum flexibility. Okay. And based on the information, I think the argument that's heard is allowing them to survive or have maximum flexibility and basically try to survive due to the budget cuts. But, you know, what I'm trying to understand here, and I don't think it's been proven to the body, how with this fiscal year's outlay in terms of the proposed appropriation, how over $19 million towards the operations of the Attorney General is not suitable, where they would need additional flexibility to do their job, considering. I still don't feel that that number is justified before this body. I think that's a substantial amount for one single function of this government. So I'd have to object to the amendment that scratches out or strikes out lines 19 through 24.
Okay, thank you. Any other senator wish to be heard on the Vice Speaker's amendments? Senator St. Nicholas, and then any other senator, and then Senator Snogestein.
A point of inquiry, Mr. Chairman, first of all. Was this amendment requested by the Office of the Attorney General?
Yes, both of them were requested by the Office of the Attorney General, just like last year, Mr. Speaker, so they're identical.
We didn't provide this.
For the purpose of the clerks, we'll deal with one at a time. We'll do the strike-throughs as the first amendment that we're dealing with. So if you wish to address that, please.
The prior year's budget, did it include the language that's being stricken through? Or was it a lump sum appropriation last fiscal year? Mr. Chairman, on the 2018 fiscal year budget?
Last year they were lump sum.
Was there a rational basis for OFB making it itemized?
Last year we did mostly everybody lump sum. We did it was lump sum last year.
Last year was lump sum, okay. Is this year's sum lower than last year's sum?
Yes.
Okay, I'll have to express my support for the amendment, Mr. Chairman. If last year's figures were lower and they had higher, and they had a lump sum appropriation, and this year's are lower, then we really should extend the same flexibility to the agency as they had the previous fiscal year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, for the information of the body, last year their appropriation was the RFRP was 14,849,676.
And that included a lump sum?
Yes.
Okay. I support the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr.
Any
Chairman,
other-
point of inquiry after, sorry.
Go ahead.
The last year was 14.8. Can I get that number again?
That's the FRP.
That was the
actual
FRP, was
16.25.
14,849,676.
Say that one more time, Mr. Chairman.
14,849,676.
With the FRP?
Yes. And their federal grants was last year was also 4,074,104.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other senator wish to be heard on the Attorney General's office? Any other senator wish to be heard? Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, Senator Snoggason, you did have your hand up.
Mr. Speaker, the only thing I was concerned with is that I know that there was an amendment yesterday in reference to $300,000 for a tax attorney.
That's in Section 4, and it's still there. It hasn't been touched.
Okay, that's in Section 4 on the amendment, correct?
Correct. It's not in it's not in this, but we did pass that yesterday. So
The only thing I wanted to, and I was looking for that amendment, because I wanted to make sure that we have an understanding that at the Attorney General's office, whenever a case is forwarded for prosecution, that's the only time a tax attorney gets involved, when they present it in court. And it's normally in a silver platter. I'm only concerned is that the Department of Revenue and Taxation has been trying to get an attorney, and the amount of money that they're proposing, the $300,000, is something the Department of Revenue and Tax has never had. That ability to have the flexibility to hire somebody at that much money. So I'm only concerned is that I want to make sure that the intent is that the Attorney General will at least obligate 50% of that attorney's time with the department so that they can pursue other tax issues.
And
Thank
for
you.
the chair's information, 10 years ago, I made an amendment for $200,000 for a tax attorney directly to Revenue and Taxation, and they did not hire.
Understood, sir.
Vice Speaker, on your amendment, anybody else on the Vice Speaker's amendment to strike through to give lump sum? There's been an objection. All those in favor of the Vice Speaker's amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes. Vice Speaker, your second amendment is to have a new section 5, which it should read new section 6.
That's correct. It should be a new section 6. And this amendment, Mr. Speaker, would it just lists all the funds that are currently within the purview of the Attorney General's office, and also includes those that they can also be used for operations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does everybody understand?
Or authorizes them, to use the funds as required by law, and yes, thank you, Mr.
Does everybody understand what the Vice Speaker is proposing? She's proposing that we give the Attorney General the authority to utilize these funds that are within her office. The grand total of it is $193,614 as of July 31st, and that sum be made available to whoever is the Attorney General for operations. Is that clear? Am I correct, Madam Vice Speaker?
That's correct, Mr. Speaker. This is again at the request of the Attorney General and similar to what we did last year. Thank you.
Okay. Any senator wish to be heard? Senator Estevez.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I object to this amendment. I understand the intent. However, I think it's been made very clear by this body based on the amount of general fund appropriation given to the Attorney General. And again, I'm just curious, if they were in such a financial predicament and they need the flexibility that no one else in the government has been allowed, then why didn't they spend all the money they had available to them? I mean, I'm of the mindset, considering the financial crisis, of a use it or lose it. And so, you know, if they're just going to continuously be able to not use the appropriation, you know, they have their special funds available, not utilize them because they get so much in general fund appropriation, and then have a slush fund afterwards because it continuously gets, it's revolving. The justification that they should have maximum flexibility, Mr. Chairman, there's 57 million so far cut across the whole government, and we're not giving any other agency flexibility. So it doesn't seem appropriate that we're making these special exceptions, considering how much general fund appropriation we offer to an entity that doesn't even use their own internal funding mechanisms. There are so many entities that don't have revenue generating capacity. And we don't even look to level the playing field. I don't buy the argument that we need to give special treatment to one agency over another, saying that they're getting cuts. Well, everybody's getting a cut. So if we're going to start doing this and going down this road, I think we need to be consistent and give the other agencies the same type of flexibility because of the cuts. So I object, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any other senator wish to be heard on the Terlahi amendment for the new subsection 6? Any other senator wish to be heard on the Terlahi amendment, subsection 6? You may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I only want. Sorry.
Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, can you just repeat the figure that the FY18 original budget had appropriated to
the original appropriation to the Attorney General in the FY18 before the FRP was $16,249,713.
All right. And the reason why I asked that question is to drive home the point that the Attorney General's office has taken a decrease in their funding level. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, and every agency is taking a decrease,
right,
save for one.
Yes.
The hospital.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I listened to the previous speaker from Jonia's comments, and I just want to know, are they not using this money because it's not being allocated to them in a timely manner, or do we know what is the holdup of expending these funds?
I will give the oversight chair.
No, it's not that. It's just to allow them to use them throughout the year. These are for different things, such as the Victim Witness Housing Travel Fund. That's about $18,000 right now, or when they gave us the balances, but I'm sure that goes up and down depending on the status of cases. And there's a Consumer Protection Fund of $2,800, but I just wanted to point out that, yeah, the Attorney General's office, even under that option 2, what we had discussed during our budget hearings, would have been at 14.78 under option 2. In 2018, Public Law 3442, it was appropriated 16.25, and they were really concerned at that time that they were not going to be able to make it to be able to recruit prosecutors. And I think prosecutor recruit is one of the hardest things that they are doing over there, and that is one of the reasons why they need utmost flexibility. Because when there's vacancies in prosecutors, they just need to be, or when they need additional, like when they have, you know, persons assigned for special cases, or then they need that's when this flexibility really comes in. It's for these, you know, for all the cases that they're handling, and they are handling our tax collections, and they are they're going to be critical, I think, under that SAR fund for handling that, and that's hopefully, you know, they're going to earn that money that they're going to get from the SAR fund. But yeah, so this is really just this money they're able to use for these programs, but this gives them additional flexibility to use them in and out of the different programs when they need it, when they need to, just because of the revolving amounts. For example, if they need additional in the witness travel fund and they don't have it, they don't want to hold their cases. I think we had a couple cases that had that type of problem. And anyways, I just wanted to point out that yeah, they've been reduced from their 16.25 in FY18 to 14.739. I think that's significant, especially in light of what they have told us at the public hearings. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just a point of inquiry, Mr. Speaker. The oversight chairwoman, I don't think presented the fund balance of the Office of the Attorney General Operations Fund, which is also specified in here that would revert back.
Yeah, I think that is 2,000. Well, I have one sheet that says 2,366. I think this is on one date. Maybe OFB has a different date, but
Would we be able to break down those funds individually again for the balance? I don't know if they were all, I think the total cumulative amount was like around 190,000.
At the bottom of your amendment is the total amount. Oh, no, maybe 194. One night. $193,614.
Correct. I understand that, Mr. Chairman. What I'm asking is the breakdown, because somewhere either it's evenly distributed, and based on the information put out by the oversight chairwoman, I'm trying to find out where the most substantial amount is that would revert back, and to then present the question as to why it wasn't utilized in the last fiscal year. So I think one of them was 2,000, one might have been 4,000. Do we have that breakdown available?
The oversight chair.
I think the largest portion of these funds is in a notary public revolving fund. That's a highly restricted fund. So they haven't used it because of the restrictions. They were trying to save it to use for that purpose.
And could you elaborate, please, specifically to what restrictions? And
well, these are all special funds, especially very highly restricted. So what we did in 2018 was give them an exception to the restrictions and allow them to use them kind of in and out.
So what would the notary fund normally be used for if the restrictions remained in place?
I can get that for you. I just have to refresh my memory.
Thank you. And okay, and I think, and I'd like to know, I mean, if there is a valid reason for why the funds weren't spent, and I think we've seen this, Mr. Chairman, with the revolving recycling fund, is that it couldn't have been spent because they were waiting for an update on the rule. I think that's valid. That's a valid argument, but I would just like that information before I'm able to.
If we could take a 1-minute recess, I believe the Attorney Generals are outside.
We'll take a short recess.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Committee of the Whole is back in order. Senator Estevez, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, after consulting with the Attorney General and her providing clarification on the funds and how they would be utilized into the future, I would withdraw my objection.
Thank you very much. So, there being no objection, we have a new Section 6. Public Defender Service Corporation. Subsection A on the appropriation. Section 2, Transfer Authority. Mayor's Council of Guam. On the first section, any senator wish to be heard? Senator Uggan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at the fiscal year 2018 budget allocation, and I'm seeing a total appropriation of 8.7, and then based on page 100, the total allocation is 10.1. And there were some concerns raised by, I believe, 1 or 2 mayors with regards to the budget that they're receiving. So am I reading things incorrectly?
We have to all remember that last year's appropriation to the Mayor's Council included the MOU on the recycling fund, which is not available this year. And so we had to fund them with general fund and territorial, the tourist attraction fund and funds that we could use for the operation of the Attorney General's, as opposed to the recycling fund.
Well,
so
like
that's why the difference. It's still less than what they actually had last year with the MOU.
So is it less because based on the summary of appropriation funding sources, I'm looking at the Mayor's Council $8.7 million, and then here the total figure based on your budget proposal is 10.1. So less, so the recycling revolving fund, the MOU, provided them just slightly more than what is allocated here?
It's not slightly more. It was more to the tune of, I think, $3 million.
It's about 2.8?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, but even transposing the numbers, okay. Okay, I just think in this particular case, with the exception of the recycling fund, that I'm trying to understand where a couple of the mayors were coming from. But thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We tried to make them whole in this, as whole as possible, but still, like everybody else, save for the hospital, everybody has suffered a cut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay? On the first page, page 100, anything? And their total on the 101, reading 10,101,972. 107,972. Section 2, Limited Gaming Fund. On the limited gaming fund provision?
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
you have the section 2. What's the money used for? It gives the chapter and the title. I'm just wondering if it's for maintenance, for beautification, for what? It's not broken down. I have to look up the chapter, and I just wanted to, we can get a short blurb of what it's for. That's all. I just wanted to know that. But I agree that they should have the money. Sports? It's for sports? Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Section Okay. So on the limited gaming fund, are we okay? On the limited gaming fund? On the street maintenance and beautification? On the street maintenance and beautification? Island-wide beautification projects? Any senator wish to be heard on that? Island-wide beautification projects. Section 5, ground maintenance for schools. Any senator? Public safety and social education programs. Any senator? Host community premium appropriation. Senator?
Mr. Chair, is this is there a continuing or running balance on this program, or because every year I understand, you know, this is the appropriation to the host communities, but is there a running balance? Is this compounding over time, or is these host communities accumulating this appropriation?
As I understand it, the two villages that are receiving it because of either they had a dump in their community or they're now hosting the solid waste facility. And as I understand it, the village of Chalampago was hoping to accumulate a sum large enough to be able to build a new gym or community center. And so they're trying. I think the same thing is true of Inarajan, that they're trying to save all their money in the hopes of being able to do something big as opposed to just spending for the sake of spending.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just
Okay,
a point of
thank you.
information, Mr. Chair. Early on in the term, we introduced a bill to try to increase the amount of the community host program going to the two villages of Inarajan and Chalampago. And they do have a master plan already developed so that when they receive enough subsidy that they would be able to contract and build services for the community, such as a gym, a community center. So there's already a plan in place for them to develop with the location also desired. Thank you.
Thank you very much for providing that information, Senator. Senator Snoggerstein, did you see your hand go up?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a question. On page 101, line 15, has the Mayor's Council had any problems that Imagalai, the governor's, was taking money from their accounts? I'm just curious because I see that on one section, and I'm wondering if that's have they had a problem in the years, and if they've had, then maybe that'd be appropriate for the whole Mayor's Council's account, so that they can feel that it's theirs, and they have the flexibility to use it as they need it, wherever they need it. I mean, they're protected from being siphon money for other purposes.
I apologize. I didn't ask that question of the executive director when he was here. But judging from their ability to be able to get the administration to give them cash up front to run the senior program, they've got some clout. I don't think they're ones that are being shorted. Okay, so we're back on 103 with the host host premium. Restriction on general use of general special funds for travel. It's repeated. Senator Rodriguez, you have an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, it was circulated, but the provision is just to add a provision similar to the other branches of government. The continuing appropriation is something that the Mayor's Council was also provided in this year's fiscal year. We can allow that, please.
Any objection to this amendment? Any senator wish to be heard? Any objection? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that was pretty fast. I just had a question.
Go ahead.
The amendment reads, notwithstanding any other provision of law, the allotted but unexpected balance of funds appropriated to MCOG for fiscal year 2018 and prior shall not lapse and shall continue to be available until fully expended. Is this specifically for all the funds that they're receiving to include the special funds? Or?
Each one of them has their own,
because it says MCOG.
their own cumulative. Right. Each mayor has, some spend as they receive it. Others are saving it rather than buying a bush cutter today, save 3 years and buy a riding mower. And so, no, really seriously, I have commended them on their willingness to do that. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no objection. Office of Public Accountability.
The committee in the whole is now back in session on the Office of Public Accountability. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Esteves.
Just for the record, and just to highlight that, that I believe that the chairman has recused himself because of a potential conflict, and just for the record to reflect that. And as the ethics chair, I commend him for that move.
Thank you very much, Senator Esteves, and that's absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, he also left the hallway. Any discussion on the Office of Public Accountability? Once more, any discussion on the Office of Public Accountability allocating 1.258365 for their operations? Guam Board of Accountancy, 789,780. Any discussion? Any discussion on Guam Board of Accountancy? Guam Visitors Bureau, total allocation of 22,335,216. Any discussion on the Guam Visitors Bureau? Senator Tom Atta and then Senator Espadon.
Mr. Chairman, on Section 3, the way I read that is that for fiscal year 2019, GVB may allocate not more than the sums appropriated.
Senator Atta, we'll go section by section. So section 1.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Senator Atta. Section 1, any discussion? Appropriation allocation of 22,335,216 from the Tourist Attraction Fund. No discussions. Section 2, GVB Rainy Day Fund. Senator Espadon, you recognize on Section 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, previously I had sent out or passed around an amendment regarding the GVB Rainy Day Fund, and that would, right now, it presently reads, notwithstanding any other provision of law, the sum of $200,000 may be allocated from the Tourist Attraction Fund, etc. I would like, the amendment basically changes the verbiage, and it will now read, if accepted, notwithstanding any provision of law, the sum of up to $650,000 may be allocated by the GVB Board of Directors from the Tourist Attraction Fund, etc. And the reason for this amendment is to reflect really what's in the law. The $650,000, what's in the rainy day law, it basically allows for the set aside for a rainy day fund of 1.5% of their appropriation, and $650,000 is reflective of that. The minimum sum that they should put into the rainy day fund is $200,000, and the reason why it's necessary to put raise that figure to $650,000 is to make sure everybody at GVB, especially among the board of directors, understand that $200,000 is not the sum, a firm sum. They could actually appropriate more so that when a rainy day does come, they may have more funds in this rainy day fund. And we have seen them tap the rainy day fund for various reasons, and because they have only been putting in $200,000 at a time ever since this fund was created, that when they tapped the fund, they basically wiped out half of their funds. So if they actually start putting more of their appropriation towards their rainy day fund, in terms of in case of emergency, they would have more to tap into at that time. So that's just the clarification that we're doing on this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Espadon. On Senator Espadon's amendment, any discussion? Senator Espadon, would you like to close?
No. The last thing is we want to also make it very clear that the funds are already there. They're under the control of GVB in terms of their appropriation, but it's only the board of directors, the GVB board of directors, that actually can allocate the sum of up to 1.5% of their budget into the rainy day fund. So it is the board of directors who have the control.
Thank you, Senator Espadon. There's been no objection on the amendment. Any further discussion? If not, Senator Atta, you're recognized on Section 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in section 3 there, I guess the amount of $750,000 for cultural heritage and community outreach is appropriated to fund the following organizations, and it lists down Pa'atatautano and about a dozen of these organizations. And then, of course, on line 17, it says the last organization, Ulitau, or Micronesian Conservation Trust. So in reading that, it seems to say you can fund Pa'atatautano or Historic Inalahan Foundation or Micronesian. It's not clear. It just seems to say that that you can only fund one of these organizations unless I'm reading it wrong. And maybe that's where legal counsel needs to take a look at the Fino English to see if he interprets it similarly.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Do you have a proposed amendment? Do you have a proposed amendment?
Well, so I think maybe the way to resolve that is that then on line 17, instead of using the word or, change that to read the word and. So you can fund Pa'atatautano and all the other organizations and Micronesian Conservation Trust.
On the proposed amendment by Senator Ada, on line 17 to delete the word or and replace it with and, any discussion? Senator Esteves?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request more, more input from legal counsel, because as I would understand it, if it said and, based on the prior to the following organizations, and as it listed out, I think the implication of and would imply that all organizations are funded. And I think the or towards the end allows the flexibility to decide which organizations of the following. So if we could maybe get legal to clarify, because I think that amendment could have could really alter what the intent is.
Okay, Senator Esteves and Senator Ada, if we can take a 1-minute recess, and if you can consult with the legal counsel. Thank you. Good afternoon, Senators. Committee of the Whole is now back in session. There was a concern that was raised by one of our colleagues with regards to the application and the use of the word "or" on page 107, and a suggestion to change it, to delete that and add the word "and," but I understand there are other proposed amendments. Senator Esteves, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on consultation with legal counsel, my proposed amendment is on line 25 to read as follows. This chapter, comma, to any and all, any or, correction. Mr. Chairman, to any or all of the following organizations.
Okay, Senators. Thank you very much, Senator Esteves. The amendment, just so that we're all clear, page 106, line 25, after the word "to," or it would read, this chapter, comma, to any or all of, and then continue with the following organizations. On that proposed amendment to the language, any discussion? Senator Ada, if I can ask you to withdraw your original amendment? Or was it? Yeah. Okay, so Senator Ada has withdrawn his original amendment. Senator Esteves now has an amendment on the floor to insert the words, or to have the last line 25 on page 106 to read, this chapter, comma, to any or all of the following organizations. Yes, Senator San Augustine, you recognize on the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, on that same line, the may allocate not more than the sums. Any and all? What was the real English definition? I mean, differences there. They may choose not to pick any one of them. So the any and the may allocate, what is the real major difference? I think the major concern was the or on line 17 on page 107. And all of a sudden we leave the or, but we'll go to the other one and change the any and all. I'm trying to understand what we're trying to do. It was actually to differentiate between, that they can choose between anybody on the list. And that's how the may allocate, but not to exceed what they did on 2018.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Do you want Senator
that.
Esteves to yield?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not clear on the exact question, but as I understand the amendment, and in English syntax, considering that there's a comma there, is that the following statement placed after is reflective to a singular idea. So, to any of or all of the following organizations. I don't believe that that's inclusive of the sum of the allocation, which is just a maximum amount. But again, when we first placed this idea in the budget last year to give the Guam Visitors Bureau the autonomy to determine the organizations that they distribute the TAF money to, I think that was the intent of it. Unless legal says otherwise about the implication of having or remain in line 17 of page 107, I think the amendment fulfills that intent.
Thank you, Senator Esteves. Any other discussion on the amendment? Senator Nelson, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of inquiry. In fiscal year 18, did we give this authority to GVB to appropriate to all of these NPOs, or how did we work it?
These particular organizations were all individually allocated specific amounts.
Right.
So now this provision would allow the board of directors to be able to make that decision up to the amount allocated in fiscal year 18.
And we appropriated that for each NPO because we had a public hearing.
That's correct.
With all of them come and request for that dollar amount, and they gave justification for that. So now what we're doing in this provision is we're allowing GVB to pick and choose what organization they'd like to give to and the amount they'd like to give as well. Just a minute, Mr. Mr. Chair, can we bookmark this provision and then perhaps come back to it so that we can take a look at FY18's budget and to
Okay.
compare? Because I believe that it was the way that we implemented in FY18 was beneficial to all parties, and now we're handing off this to the GVB Board of Directors, and not all of these NPOs may or may not, or be any all picked. So perhaps we could request a bookmark it and see if we can get a consensus to revert back to the previous practice.
Colleagues, there's been a request to bookmark this particular section, the discussion on this, but we still have an amendment on the floor. Unless Senator Esteves would like to table his proposed amendment, we still have an amendment on the floor. Senator San Agustin, on the
Mr. Chairman,
proposed amendment.
do we have any reports or any testimony from GVB saying that they want to be able to pick and choose? I mean, that's really what our concern should be, because when we did it last year, we gave it appropriately to what they requested. Unless there's a deviation, the total amount of $750,000, unless GVB is saying that they don't want to give it to all of them, we should get a report before we start saying may or may not. And they did have a public hearing. Folks did come in. They did testify. They would like to continue getting it. If GVB has not said anything asking us to not force them to fund them, then we'll follow what they want. But I don't believe we should entertain this at this time.
Thank you, Senator San Agustin. There's still an amendment on the floor. Like I said, unless Senator Esteves would like to table that.
Mr. Chairman, if
Senator
I could
Esteves.
just provide a point of information. We could look back. I don't have any objection to tabling the argument, and I believe that we can I'd ask my colleagues to take the time to look back at the record. And what we had discussed and agreed upon at that time was that even though we provided line item appropriations, I think there was the intent that this year we would look at GVB as the grantor, and we would provide them a lump sum appropriation, because there was a lot of discussion in last year's budget as to the validity of each, I don't want to say pet project, but each initiative and each nonprofit organization that was put out there. And there was a lot of going back and forth. And I believe that this body had made the determination, or at least was the intent at the time, to look at GVB as being the grantor. And so I think the language now reflects that. And so I'm fine with tabling the discussion so we can go back and look at the record. But I just want to clarify why I believe that this language is appropriate for this budget, because they're in a better position to make the determination as to what money is available and what money can go to different initiatives based on their oversight with reports back to the legislature.
Thank you, Senator Esteves.
And just a point of information,
yes.
Mr.
Senator
Chair.
Nelson, state your point of information.
The reason why we held, the Chairwoman on Culture and Justice held the public hearing is because a lot of the new senators came in and didn't understand what the nonprofit organization did. And so that's why they came in and they justified their mission and their vision. And a lot of them, the one that has been decided on here, were funded for appropriately by line item appropriation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Nelson. Speaker Cruz, did you want to chime in?
Yes. It was the committee that determined that in this fiscal year we would allow GVB to be the one that doles out these grants rather than it being here, because here we have for almost 12 years informed many of these NPOs. This is a grant, and I think some senators will even remember days that we told them this is not going to go on forever. You're supposed to find federal funds to supplement this, and no longer come to us for it, because otherwise we are dealing with 14 or 15 different organizations coming to see you individually about supporting their project. And since this was TAF money, I apologize, but we made the determination instruct GVB that 750,000 should be set aside for cultural organizations, since they've supported it in the past. Let them deal with it as opposed to each of us having to answer the question. If it's the desire of the body to deal with them, you can. I'm just saying it's because some of them have been on the teat for 12, 13 years and just have not been able to get off. And so we've got to unlatch at some point.
Thank you very much, Speaker Cruz. There's been a request to table and to come back to Section 3 based on the possible consideration of other amendments. So, Senator Esteves, are you tabling your proposed amendment? Because we still have your amendment on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I think the amendment is still necessary based on the intent of the current language. However, I don't object after we dispose of the amendment to allow members to come back with any subsequent amendments to this particular section. But as the language reads and based on the intent of the language, I'd like the amendment to carry forward.
Thank you, Senator Esteves. There's still an amendment on the floor on page 106, line 25, on the Esteves amendment. Any further discussion? Senator San Agustin, you recognize.
I only have one more comment, Mr. Chairman. We have a list of 18, 19, 20 organizations. It's kind of restrictive to just the 20 right now. If anybody was to establish another organization based on the way this is written, they can't participate. And if that's the case, if it's may or an or any, then we need to remove the list. So whoever competes and applies at GVB, then let GVB decide that. Don't put a list that this is the only one you're going to choose because it's in law. If that's the case, then allow that flexibility so GVB will decide it themselves.
Senator San Agustin, are you objecting to the proposed amendment?
Yeah, that would be my amendment to remove it if we're going to add these different verbiage.
Let's dispose of the amendment, the Esteves amendment first, and then I will recognize you. Any other discussion on the Esteves amendment? Vice Speaker Talai, you recognize. We will bookmark this particular section because there's been a request to come back and consider it. On the Esteves amendment, any objections? There's an objection on the Esteves amendment to insert the words any or all of between the words to and the on line 25, 106. There's been an objection. All those in favor of the Esteves amendment, please signify by raising your hands. Amendment passes. Thank you, Senator Esteves. Any further discussion on Section 3 other than bookmarking and coming back to this section? If not, thank you, Senators. We've concluded our discussion on that chapter. 1 minute recess.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, the chapter is not complete. We still have Section 4.
Thank you, Senator Esteves. I was trying to stretch, but considering its authority to transfer. Okay, on Section 4. Senator Esteves, you recognize.
No objection. I just want to clarify for the record, we would need to gavel out Section 4 before we complete the Chapter 10.
Mr. Speaker, are you gaveling on every single section? I thought we initially accepted the entire document, but okay. Section 4, any objections? No objections? Thank you, Senators. 1 minute recess.
Thank you very much. Let's start into miscellaneous provisions, miscellaneous appropriations. Please, if any of you have amendments, as we go down, but let's go through these and then we'll add whatever your amendments are after we go through these provisions, okay? Yeah, miscellaneous appropriations, I'm sorry. Okay, on A, 7,719,000 for the supplemental annuity.
Mr. Speaker, if you could, just for the public that's watching, be clear if what this does, if it's the same as what they've been expecting.
This is for the supplemental annuity, and this is not the COLA. This is only for those that qualify under some formula.
And there's been no change to this policy, Mr. Speaker. That's all I wanted to ask you to put on the record.
There's no change to the policy. This is as it has been for almost 10 years. The amount has changed because of the number of people that have died and in need, but otherwise, it's the same program. We're not changing the formula. On A, for the supplemental annuity, B, this is all boilerplate all the way through G, but I'm just, if anybody wants to chime in. C, D, none, E, F, G.
Mr. Speaker, on G, just to clarify that this government Guam retirement fund, this number, we're not taking anything away from the retirees. They're not being impacted by the bill, correct?
No, this G is for the amount for the RSP. I mean, Medicare premiums, those who okay?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. H, I, let's just get through this. J, If we can just get through this appropriations, it should be fast. These are easy. All right, Section 2, survivor annuity. Again, this just changes the date of the survivors that are added onto. Section 3, disability supplemental annuity additions. These are for new employees that are getting disability. Section 4, retiree supplemental annuity additions. Section 5, appropriation for COLA. $2,000 each for a total appropriation of $14,104. Anyone? B requires the autonomous agencies make their contributions for that. C, D, E, E, Section 6, retiree medical dental.
Mr. Speaker, can you just explain a little bit about the adjustment that is made out of the 34.9 to now 32?
The difference is as a result of the RSP, the Retiree Supplemental Plan, that's pursuant to 3485, Senator Espaldon's, that all of us over the age of 65 that are eligible to be moved to the Medicare would be moved to the Medicare. So supposedly was going to be a savings of 2.8.
So this does not negatively impact?
No.
Okay.
This is covering their insurance. Section 7. This is the Teeds and lease.
Mr. Speaker, is this the lease that the government got a bad deal on? This is the municipal lease?
Yes. Thank you for the adjective that you put in front of that. Yes.
Thank you.
But it is. All right, this is Teedson High School, the amount for Teedson High School. And again, I remind everybody, I did write to the AG if we could divide this up, and I was told it was one and one for all, and you cancel all. Senator San Nicolas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out and perhaps to inquire. And first of all, you know, opinions from the Attorney General, there are opinions. But that being said, My observation of this entire T's and lease appropriation is that it's subdivided. It's broken out into separate appropriation amounts. And if this has been the case since the inception of the lease and in every appropriation thereafter, I observe this to make it very clear that the legislative intent is to always keep these separate and apart from one another, severable. Otherwise, it should just be one lump sum appropriation for T's and facilities or something to that effect. If we look at the figures, Mr. Chairman, on A and D, those are the two areas that are directly related to the school. And that comes out to about 5.5 million out of the $8 million total. If the remainder is severable just by amending it out, we would save $3 million on the budget. Out of curiosity, I mean, let's say a governor were to come in and line item veto those specific sections, except for the school. How would that measure out with respect to the lease?
According to the opinion that was provided to us, the entire lease would be breached.
And if we had a new attorney general issue a different opinion, all of a sudden we would be able to do that?
If there is a new opinion, yes. And the way that we broke it, the committee has decided to break this down is so that all of you understand how much was going to each. And though for 3 years it's been broken down this way, about how much each was going to get, in spite of all my letters to the governor and to DOE about the fact that they had not moved into the new building, the new office building, until this January, or the warehouses until a couple of months ago, the 10 million was always being received by the lessor in January. And I could not get anybody to renegotiate or to represent on my behalf. It wasn't because we weren't trying. I tried. And if you want to bookmark this, I will share with you all the correspondence that we have. And if you think that you can, without jeopardizing the start of the school year, I'd be willing to entertain it. I'm just saying there are some things that I'm willing to gamble on, and having Teason High School and GACS out because I wanted to push a point, I'm not ready. But I'm willing to share the correspondence with any of you if you want to look at this. So maybe that's what we'll do. I understand that there's a move here to try to get me to break.
I'm just raising the observation, Mr. Chairman, because if the legislature has always been breaking out the appropriations on an itemized basis, I would proffer that it makes it very clear that the legislative intent with respect to the municipal lease is that these items should be severable and not one all or nothing set of circumstances. These are all separate line items. And from my understanding of the way municipal leases work is the whole reason why they do not impact the debt ceiling is because the appropriating body ultimately retains the final authority on whether or not they want to fund it. And so unless this appropriating body passed some new language to enter into a lease that included everything under a single lump sum, I don't think the executive has the authority to enter into those kind of leases outside of the scope of what the appropriating body authorized. But I just wanted to put all of that on the record, Mr. Chairman, because, you know, this is an area that when we're not fully utilizing our existing education assets as it is, you know, there's a lot of vacant space down at Southern High School. And when we're further going out and taking out leases and we're paying for them, even when we're not moved into them, I mean, we're burning cash in an agency that is always saying it's starved for it. And it has other capital assets that it could be using to meet these facility needs beyond going out and spending another $3 million to lease space when there's so much vacant space within that very agency.
I fully agree with you, Senator, and many years ago, not only myself, but Senator Ben before me suggested they go to Southern High School. Thankfully, they were using the old Brody for part of the special ed. Now they're excited about the fact that they can consolidate themselves into the new building. But it's been a long time, and it wasn't as if in previous public hearings I hadn't chided and criticized the board and the superintendent. That's when I lost confidence, was when the decision was made for as I've been chiding them, the palatial digs, but they never reconsidered, and with all the letters that were written to the governor and to the attorney general of trying to renegotiate it when we weren't in it and considered those parts having as a breach, we kept getting back the opinion, you breach for one, you breach for all. You terminate one, you don't fund for one, in spite of the fact that we weren't even using the building for 3 years. We paid for it. And I couldn't get them to represent us in trying to terminate the lease because they were of the opinion that it would terminate the entire lease. Maybe the new Attorney General will have a completely different feel, and some of you might be able to work with them to do that. I'm hoping. But I'm just saying it wasn't for not wanting to try, because it's been 3 years since we started the letters and the request, and even backhanded compliments of being a great business person if you renegotiate this lease, but even that doesn't work. But thank you for putting it on the record. Okay?
Maybe if we could just bookmark this, Mr. Speaker. I am concerned because the person who refused to negotiate this is also one of the bidders in the Simon Sanchez lease that we're falling all over ourselves to keep giving more money for A&E. The other thing is that DOE has completely washed their hands of any liability or any responsibility for these payments, and have been covered all this time by legislatures. And I don't know. I just like to check one more thing if we could. I know that you've done extensive efforts on this. I don't think I'm going to solve it. I just would like to just check one more thing before we pass it all the way.
All right, fine. It's bookmarked. Starting on 114, bookmarked all the way to 116. Recess until 9 tomorrow morning. Please, 9.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, and make sure that all your amendments are ready. I'm sorry.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chairman. We're just running up against the clock, and I know that the clerks also has a massively amended budget bill to engross. perhaps we can plow through. We just have this last chapter, and then we can give them a full 24 hours to begin engrossment.
I'm game. I was planning on going till 10 tonight, but I keep getting.
It's Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so-
No, I understand. And so if everybody comes in tomorrow morning, and we start and we finish, they have been engrossing as we've been going along. And I want to thank them for the fact that they have been engrossing as we've been going along. And if we don't make that many amendments, it'll be so much easier. But I know that all of you have a number of amendments, so please get all your amendments ready this evening so that when we start tomorrow morning at 9, we will go straight through with amendments without having to stop for copy. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.